All right, well, I want to welcome everyone to Strategies for Community Residential Climate Resilience. This course is brought to you by the Green Home Institute. The Green Home Institute is a nonprofit with a mission to empower people to make healthier and more sustainable choices in the renovation and construction of the places we live. Today, I will be your moderator. My name is Brett Little, and I am the education manager here. And you should also know Green Home Institute has been one of the original Enterprise Green Communities technical assistance providers from the beginning, and so we are here to help if you have projects anywhere to achieve these goals for low-income housing tax credits or other things that you want to achieve. This course is approved for multiple continuing education units, along with our certified green home professional designation in the place pillar. AIA, health, welfare, and safety may make it applicable to your state-based design or contractor license. Green Home Institute needs your support to keep these sessions going. Consider becoming a member, and you'll get instant access to all of our recorded sessions without registration and on-demand session, among many other benefits. So with that, I am going to hand it off to our speakers here. I'm super excited to have Enterprise community partners on, and I think we have you on, at least someone from your organization on at least once a year. So it's always great to be talking about the work you all are doing. And I want to have Lori here and Mihir introduce themselves, who the organization is, and what they have as far as resources to help assist you on your project. So Lori, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Brett. It's a pleasure to be with you and the entire community of Green Home. And we are been a partner with Green Home Institute for many, many years and are so thankful for the work you're doing, Brett, every day to make sure that our industry has the tools and resources and partners to shape our world in a positive way. And it's so wonderful to see so many folks from around the nation. We've got all the regions covered, save for Hawaii. I don't see anyone from Hawaii or Puerto Rico, but keep introducing yourselves. So we're going to go through a sprint through a tool that we created to support climate resilient housing. So I'd like to first introduce myself. And Mihir's going to pick this up at 12:30. I am the Director of Climate and Sustainability for the Enterprise Community Investment Division. This is our capital division, which includes multiple business lines. Enterprise Community Partners has been funding and financing affordable housing for over 40 years. We syndicate housing tax credits, or one of the leading syndicators of tax credits in the nation. We also are a CDFI. We're an S&P rated community development finance institution with projects all over the nation. We also have a real estate equity division, which invests financing and investment dollars into affordable housing. In fact, we just launched a new fund called the Renter Wealth Creation Fund, which is the first in the nation, an effort to support renters to build wealth in their units. And we also have a new market tax credit business line. So we are very involved and invested in affordable building. And one of the things that's coming up more and more in the space around housing finance is the rising cost of insurance related to climate risk. So if anyone on the chat would like to weigh in and chat this, would love to hear from you. Costs of insurance are rising precipitously, in large part due to the incredible risks that our nation is facing around climate. And carriers are starting to say we can't afford to continue subsidizing or the lower rates we've been providing. So we're seeing costs of insurance go up. We're also seeing some carriers pull out of markets. We're seeing additional exposure to our housing stock. So today's discussion is really about how do we ensure that we can both reduce our fiscal exposure to our housing, and in some states that might have actually yield some return on insurance premiums. And, you know, for many of you that work with housing developers that are using housing credits, it's important to make sure that your asset is going to be whole and able to deal with the ongoing risk, in large part because you're on the hook for 15 years. for those properties. So a lot more investors are asking questions around what does it look like to build housing that's resilient, and a lot of investors are concerned that the floodplains are growing, and so how will they make sure that their investments are whole? All this being said, we created a tool which I'm showing now. And Brett, let me know if you can't see it.
Nope, there it is.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So this tool was created essentially after Superstorm Sandy. It was created as a book to help describe the ways that affordable housing owners in the New York region were thinking about how to partially mitigate risk from climate change. So after Superstorm Sandy, if anyone of you are from New York, and it could be Hurricane Ida, it could be Hurricane Maria, it could be a derecho, it could be a tornado. These experiences and these events particularly hit multifamily and affordable housing very specifically. And so multifamily housing has been a very unique residential typology. Many of you may just work with single family, but we see the value of looking particularly at multifamily for resiliency. It deserves a special eye. After Hurricane Sandy, Enterprise went out. We went out to about 200 properties across the region to say what happened during the event, and what can we do to improve these properties from Sandy events happening again, right? Flooding, wind, etc. And what we found was that guidance from FEMA was telling us to elevate our properties, which was going to be insufficient. You can't elevate a multifamily property easily. We also know that most of our properties are existing housing stock. So we need to figure out ways to mitigate these buildings and adapt them to changing climate risk, so that they can be around for generations. We know there is a climate emergency in the nation, around the globe. We also know there's a massive affordable housing crisis. So our charge was, how do we mitigate housing and protect it from changing climate? And this is existing housing. So we created a tool called the Strategies for Multifamily Building Resilience. And it was it's been a very popular tool and book form. And when COVID hit, we said, look, we've got to get this information out to the larger community, and we've got to digitize this and modernize it. So we modernized it. We brought it into what we now have as a climate safe housing platform. I'm happy to announce, and this is really exciting, this tool I'm going to walk you through is the platform for what will be a national climate safe housing tool. Enterprise has been commissioned by HUD to create a national multifamily housing climate risk assessment that will be essentially used to support some of the IRA funds coming in. And this tool will be used by physical needs assessors across the nation on top of the existing P&As to say, look, we're in the building, what is happening in terms of climate exposure? And climate risk. And so this tool will be available next year for you all. And it will be platformed, the strategies will be platformed on this platform I'm walking you through today. You'll have to forgive me. I'm just getting over COVID. So I've got a little bit of a cough. So forgive me if I cough a little bit.
Probably normal these days, so no worries.
I have to say I have taken 3 sick days in the 9 years I've been in Enterprise. One of those sick days was last week with COVID. Okay, so here, let's dive in. And please feel free to ask questions as you go. So you all know why this is an important tool. We've seen the news, we've read the articles. I don't need to go through that here. The question for us today is, how do we solve for the protection of affordable housing as we face really unprecedented climate risk? So first of all, this is a digital tool. It's available in 100 languages. All you have to do is translate up here, but you can get this in 100 languages. There's no tool of this kind for climate resiliency and housing like this. And what we do is we provide you with right at the front end of the site. You don't have to go anywhere but front page to understand what are the strategies. I hate going through tools where like I have to go through 7 different pages to get to what I need to get to. This is meant to support you as you walk through buildings, as you go through sites, to quickly figure out what you need to do. So it's at climate safe housing, and we've split climate safe strategies into 4 categories. Protection. This is a category that looks at reducing the building's vulnerability to extreme weather, or put in other words, mitigation. Mitigation. These are the hardscape engineered strategies. We're going to go through a couple of those in a minute. But these are about the traditional mitigation strategies. And some of these are actually approved by FEMA in the NFIP program. So you can actually get a risk rating adjustment in some of your FEMA insurance costs by looking at these protection strategies. Then we have the adaptation strategies. These are strategies that help improve the facility's ability to adapt to changing climate conditions, thinking about extreme heat, thinking about energy efficiency, thinking about precipitation and stormwater management. These are your more sort of green strategies, natural landscaping and green infrastructure strategies. Then we've got a section on backup. Every building that's built today should have some level of backup in their energy systems. This looks at energy, it looks at lighting, it looks at potable water. And if you're going through enterprise green communities, this is actually going to help you comply with the backup islandable power strategies in the green community section. And then in the community section, these are strategies that I say cover the software of the building of community ties, the supporting of residents. When we talk about community strategies or social strategies, I think of it as a software, much as I think about the rest of these strategies as the hardware, right? So the software, these are the strategies that help encourage folks that are living in the building to be connected. I live in a 300-unit building in Brooklyn, so I am particularly fond of these strategies. I also want to mention and bring to the front a philosopher that I love and had followed for many years, Jane Jacobs, who lived in New York City and was a community planner for years and a real leader around community resiliency. She talked about the importance of the eye on the street, the importance of the woman who's looking at the 3rd floor window and how she actually provides a level of security on the building. Well, when we talk about community strategies, it's also about enhancing that eye on the street, making sure that residents can be partners in developing green and resilient buildings. So these are all the 4 strategies. We've got 19 strategies here that will support your multifamily building. Before I leave the segment today, I am going to introduce you to our single family tool, which we're not going to go into today, but I do want to make sure I give you visibility on that. So again, multifamily building. And here's what we're going to do. I want to give you an example of each of these strategies and tell you what the components of the strategy are. So let's go to protection, mitigation. Wet flood proofing is enabling your building to flood under the base flood elevation. So it's essentially building floodable buildings. Dry flood proofing is where you actually can create walls or protection around your components. And so I'm going to pull this one up. So every building strategy has a building. The building is the actor. The building is our actor that is present in every strategy. We use the same building. And so what we have here is the building with the actual strategies around dry flood proofing noted and visually articulated here. You'll see this line, which is the called the design flood elevation. That's the elevation at which you should build to. This is predicated on what's called the base flood elevation. The base flood elevation is the line in which your building can be flooded. It's where your building is most vulnerable. Design flood elevation is typically 1 to 2 feet of freeboard above the BFE. In some communities, it's 1 foot. In some more forward-thinking communities, they're doing 2 feet because they realize we're planning for today and for tomorrow. And I'm going to go through some of these glossary terms. They're actually in this guide, so you can use this. It's amazing to me how few folks know about the DFE or BFE in our community. It's often, you'll find engineers know about these terms, but how many of you on this call have heard of the BFE? So these are important terms for you to know because we're moving into a situation where the flood lines are rising and you need to know where the floodplains are. We're going to go through that. So we go through the description of the actual strategy. We go through the strategy in action. What does it look like to put it into action, to implement it? And here we've got some designs on what this might look like. Dry fluid proofing is essentially submarining your building. It's essentially walling your building off from flooding versus wet flood proofing, which is allowing water to move through. We have, short-term, midterm, and long-term implementation strategies. We got some pictures that we worked really hard to pull up from the industry. And then we've got a visual of what this looks like in your basement. An O&M consideration, and it's really important. We always think about O&M. Every strategy has an O&M consideration because we never want to do anything without considering its maintenance and operations considerations. The cost, and the costs are based on actual bids that we put out in New York and New Jersey. If you're to look for costs in the industry, you could even put it out on your marketplace. You can go to means, RS means, supporting strategies, and then resources. What more resources can you get to support that strategy? And then a case study where it's possible to get. And so that's every single strategy is like that. So I can go to site perimeter on the right side and go right to the strategy here, and you'll go through the same thing. Now I'm going to go back to the front page and we're going to go to adaptation. So elevating equipment is one of my favorites. And this is about getting your building systems out of the floodplain. And so again, we go through the description and function, we go through the strategy and action and operations, estimated cost, and supporting strategies. Many of you may be thinking, well, I am not in a real flood zone. So let me go to a strategy that may look at heating. Or let's go to efficiency. So envelope efficiency is about ensuring that, and all of you on this call can represent this. This is an important consideration, and there's a lot of funding coming forward from the Inflation Reduction Act right now. So this is an important strategy to pay attention to. I'll just say this while I have a captive audience. Putting solar panels on a building is a great idea, and I'm a huge fan of renewable power. I'm a fan of solar PV. I'm a fan of solar thermal. I feel like it's the way of the future, but please don't put solar panels on a building that's inefficient. When we talk about solar and renewable energy, we want to use that precious resource and make sure our building is operating at maximum efficiency. We want high performance buildings. We do not want to use precious solar power for inefficient buildings. I mean, you could also say we don't want to use any power, precious power, for inefficient buildings, right? So this is about giving you an update on description and function of the actual components, strategy and action, lots of good stuff in here. Different kinds of glass and cladding opportunities, fenestration opportunities. We give you some really good visuals of efficiency and why it's important to think about the heat island in the city and what efficiency can do. Lots of great resources and a really great case study. And so we've got lots of these really great strategies that are available to you if you go through each of the strategy sections. And, I'm going to guarantee if you go through each of these sections, not only will you be smarter, but you'll be a better support for your customers, for your clients, for your jurisdictions. You'll be able to speak about climate resiliency in a much more demonstrative way. Maintaining backup power. This is important. Well, we give you lots of really good information about backup power and all of those really important considerations. We give you pictures of the generators and fuel sources. So these are a little bit about the strategies. You'll see that I keep going back to the front page. I can get to the strategies through the front page, landing page, right? Or I can go right here. We can go to community ties, or I can go to the right side where we have a table of contents. And the table of contents is gives you another option to get through to these case studies and the actual strategies. But I want to show you an interesting tool that we've developed that's going to bring me to single family housing in a second. I wanted to show you the introduction page. So I'm navigating through this because I want you to see how I'm navigating here. If you want to get into the insides of the book and understand the framing for these resources in some baseline terms, it's important that you read the introduction. So I would ask everyone to read the introduction of this book, because the introduction is where we give you the language to understand the importance of these strategies. This is the context and framing for this platform. And we walk you through what's happening around the nation with housing and building and the exposure that these buildings face. We walk you through guiding principles of what it means for multifamily housing to be resilient. So you can pull out this text and use it in any grants or any kind of messaging that you want to do. This is ready for you to use. And we give you some background information on how to start using these tools. And here's going to talk about the first step, which is identify your hazard exposure in a couple minutes. We're going to give you the tools to understand how to identify your hazards. And again, this is going to expand over the next year as we build out this HUD tool. And then this is a really important review of what the flood zone is, because many of you are working in flood zones, whether it's a river, whether it's a coastal community, whether it's a lake. This also helps with some precipitation issues as well, because remember, precipitation is not as closely mapped as flooding or surge, and more precipitation events are rising in areas that we didn't have as much. So you're going to want to learn your terms around flooding. And so this gives you some really great information about the context of this tool. And if you're a Green Communities provider, we provide you with a run through of which of these strategies helps you meet the criteria. So again, if you're a Green Communities applicant, and you can go right to it, if you go to the right-hand side, you can actually reference this as you go through some of the resiliency strategies in your Green Communities application. So now what I want to do is I want to go right to something, it's a treat that we created to support our projects that we're moving out in our programs like Keep Safe Florida, which is an effort to help multifamily housing owners figure out how to support their projects. If anyone on here is from Florida, email us, because we've got a great program that's available to you to actually help you get into the building and figure out what to do to improve its resiliency. It's actually free this year and it's available to you. We created something called the Hazard Strategies Guide. The Hazard Strategies Guide is a combination of all of our multifamily and single family strategies. So you can actually, there's 65 strategies here. I'm really excited about this. And these show you all of the various strategies that are out there to support your single or multifamily building. I think this is a fantastic roadmap for you as you think about things such as mold remediation, right? Or even the pandemic. We've got all kinds of strategies in here that are built out to help you figure out what you want to do. And a lot of these strategies actually show up not only here, but if you go to this hazard map, roadmap, it's going to actually send you over to our Keep Safe website, which is specifically for single family and island communities. And Brett, we're not going to have time to go through this today. This could be another discussion, but for those of you that mostly work with single family, this is the guide for you, because this is not only available in English, it's available in Spanish. It was built with leaders across Puerto Rico and the VI and some input from our friends in Hawaii. And this is specifically for a single family application. And I have books that I can send you because we printed out a bunch of books before COVID hit. So we actually, this is a very, very popular guide. We're not going to go through it today, but that relates to this. So, you know, the upshot for a lot of this is if you have, and Brett, I'll have time for 5 minutes for questions. The upshot here is we have for you, you know, a variety of strategies to make housing safer, to make it more resilient. Like I said, it's available in, you know, 100 languages. I mean, where else can you go to get climate resilient housing translated to you in Taiwanese? You go here and you can go right and get the language. So we can Urdu, Catalan, you name it, Gujarati. So this is exciting because, you know, what we're trying to do here in the United States is help protect our housing, but, you know, folks around the globe are looking at housing and shelter. So what you do with this is going to be really helpful. And please let us know what you do with this, because we'd love to hear from you. And we're always updating this and creating case studies. And again, like I said, we are digging deep with HUD on creating this national climate risk assessment tool. So we're looking for advisors. Reach out to Brett or me or Mahir if you'd like to participate in that. Brett, I have time for a couple questions. Or I have time for one question if you'd like to ask.
Well, so I don't see questions yet, but it sounds like my question is, these things, I'd imagine need to be updated, right? Things change, building science changes, climate risks change, they get riskier and riskier by the multitude. So it sounds like with this new HUD work you're doing, that will be sort of the way you implement a change to this. Would that be accurate to say?
That's exactly it. And, you know, the first set of standards we're going to be bringing in is working with our friends in Fortified at IBHS to bring in the wind standards. And so you should be expecting those at the outset of the new year. And for everyone on the Midwest, those will be coming in. And then we're going to move to fire standards. And then we're going to move to, you know, and on and on. And again, it'll be a requisite if you want to access the IRA GRRP program. So with that, again, encouraging you all to reach out. I'm excited. Mahir is going to present to you the first step of this journey, which is the assessment of risk. So with that being said, oh, and in terms of an email address, we'll follow up afterwards.
Great. Thank you so much, Larry. It's good to virtually see you out there. I appreciate your time.
Thank you all.
So Mahir, feel free to take it away. Mahir's going to go over the evaluation tool. And just as a reminder to all of you, climate evaluation for Green Home Institute, our Green Star certification program is mandatory. You do need to evaluate in some capacity. It can be using the enterprise tools we're going to talk about. It could be climate check, whatever tool might be a valid tool. And then for enterprise, they also require this within their project priorities survey as a component of that. So this is a required thing that you need to do for your certification programs, but hopefully you find it as a useful and beneficial exercise. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Mihir. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Brett. Hi, everyone. My name is Mihir Parikh. I'm a Senior Program Director for Resilience at Enterprise Community Partners. So I sit in a little bit of a different division than Lori does. I sit with our under our solutions team, which is where we manage programs, do policy advocacy. So really trying to deliver the solutions that Lori just showed you down to the level of all the partners that we work with through our different market offices in different regions throughout the country. What I'm going to show you today, as Brett and Lori mentioned, is our Portfolio Protect tool, which is our property level climate risk evaluation tool. And I'm also going to give you a little highlight of Enterprise's Resilience Academies, which is one of our newest programs that kicked off in the fall of 2021, moving around different regions around the country, providing education and technical assistance with owner operators, developers such as yourselves on climate risk reduction. So I will give you a little preview of that as well. But just to dive into the Portfolio Protect tool, and before I show screen share and show you that website, Lori was alluding to this, but really at Enterprise, the steps that we take to start addressing climate risk reduction are, number one, do some sort of assessment and really a check of what regional climate hazards you're dealing with, right? Seems like there's folks on this call are from a variety of different places around the country. I myself is sitting in DC. So obviously the climate hazards that I face, both from a shock, meaning an immediate event, immediate short-term event like a hurricane or a tornado, versus a stressor like extreme heat, extreme temperatures, which could happen longer over time, are going to be different within each state, each part of the country, each region, and even within a state. Obviously, you can have different microclimates across the state. So there's things like the National Climate Assessment that really break down different regions of the country, which I would definitely suggest reviewing to really understand of not just right now what you see in front of your face, where, you know, if you live in Florida, obviously you're going to notice that you go through hurricanes, summers are getting hotter, or maybe the winters are getting a little warmer as well. But really looking at going into the future with the change in climate, with climate change, what are things going to look like? How are flood maps changing? You know, Lori alluded to the FEMA flood maps a little bit, but really looking forward into understanding how the climate is going to change 5, 10, 50 years from now. So the National Climate Assessment is definitely one tool that I would suggest looking at, and I could drop that in the chat. And then there's also other regional studies and research based on where you are. We're currently focused on our Resilience Academy in the New York, New Jersey area, and there the University of Buffalo has actually done a lot of publicly available research on the current climate state, how it affects the built environment, and also the changing climate, looking into the future, and looking at how things are changing to really understand how that then affects the built environment, and specifically housing, from a data and a numbers perspective. So depending on the region you're in, I would just suggest doing some Googling. Most areas that have a higher education, university, college presence do have research and studies published on this. But then the National Climate Assessment is definitely another tool, or your state also might have something published. So really understanding what are the climate hazards you face right now and going into the future, and how is that changing from a regional perspective. And then the next step is really realizing at the portfolio level, and if you don't have a portfolio, the building level, figuring out what kind of climate risk you face in with the address that you're entering in, or the portfolio of buildings that you have. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and preview our Portfolio Protect tool. which, as Brett mentioned, is our climate risk evaluation tool. So we've built this tool in consultation with some consultants using publicly available national data sets on several different types of hazards that exist in the country. So as you can see here, it's really to help, as I mentioned, owners, operators, and developers such as yourselves understand, if you have a portfolio, which properties are at highest risk from certain climate hazards. And if you're just entering one address or one building, what the climate risk is at that address, at that building. And then from there, you can start to prioritize your actions at the building level, at the portfolio level, in terms of addressing certain things based off of that climate risk. So we're actually, Lori had some scheduling conflicts, so we're actually doing this in a little bit of reverse order, where this is really the first step in that: assessing the risk, addressing the risk, implementing strategies to address that risk. So you'd want to use this tool and do this assessment before you go into the climate safe housing guide to really find out what the strategies are to address that risk. So we do have data available here for every state in the US. We currently do not, as you can see here, have data available for US territories. That's not something that we overlooked. It's simply the state of available public data out there right now. There are, many universities and many private companies and things like that, insurance companies that do track data for other parts of for US territories. And maybe you might enter an address in here and not get returns on some specific hazard, and you might think that's strange, but like I said, this is all based off of where mapping has been done, where data is available. So there's definitely gaps to be filled in here or there, but this really does address all 50 states. And for the most part, any address that you should enter in here, you'll be able to find. So I've gone ahead and kind of pre-populated. I believe this is City Hall in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Just pre-populated an address here. So with this, you'll just want to go into this toolbar, and you can enter in any address or addresses. I'll just, for fun, type in another address for you. This is our office in Washington, D.C. Oh, it came out twice. And so basically, you'll see here, it might take a second to process, but once you enter in the address, it pops out a risk score. And that is a climate risk score combined with the CDC's Social Vulnerability Index score. And the SVI score, which you can look into more, there's links in here to all of the data sets in full transparency of where this data is, of where we are pulling this data from. But the SVI score takes into account things like economic data, crime data, poverty data in the area. So we basically combined the climate risk with the SVI risk and populated that into one score. And as I mentioned, for full transparency, if you want to read more about how the scores are calculated, you can go down here and click on location risk score methodology, and it'll pop out basically this one pager that we have on that. So going back to the tool itself, and I lost the address. Brett, just for fun, if you want to maybe shout out a Michigan address to me to make it a little bit more applicable. I know there's a good contingent from Michigan, then I can enter that in here.
Yeah, let's take a look at our old office space in Grand Rapids. It's 920 Cherry Street, Southeast. Perfect. Maybe one of our friends from ICCF is hanging out on here, so hi to you all. That's their old space too. So
great, great. Thanks for that. So as you can see, here pops out the risk score, 14.75 out of 30. There's one high risk, and you'll see that in a second on the drop down. And I just wanted to point out before, if you do have a portfolio and you want to enter in multiple addresses, you can do that here. You can paste them all if you have them in an Excel spreadsheet or anything like that. Just paste them in the line and process, and they'll all pop up down here and process at once. When you want to view results, have a handy map. Again, it'll break down the actual score for you. Individual hazard risk ranges are 0 to 5. And as I said, this is a 14.75 out of 30. And it did mention that there's one high risk. So as you can see, this is for strong winds. And then basically under each hazard, you can drop down, you can click and drop down and find out the description of the risk, that it's relatively high. You know, this is using the FEMA's National Risk Index, some recommendations about addressing the strategies. This is obviously where you can also go to climate safe housing. And the other two resources that Lori showed. So if you do have a specific hazard that you'd like to address, those other resources will also be listed here. But you can also find those at Climate Safe Housing or the other two for single family and the hazard strategies guide that Lori showed. So as I mentioned, you know, you can really just click into each hazard and kind of find out what the vulnerability is and why. All of the, as I mentioned, the data source links are provided there. Again, if you're not, I mean, you don't really have to worry about sea level rise, but if you saw, you know, if you thought, oh, wow, if you had a coastal property and for some reason it's not showing up, it could be that there is no specific data available for that source. But like I said, by and large, that should not be the case. One other thing you can do here, and I think this is particularly handy if you do have a portfolio, or even if you don't, but if you click this little box, you are able to export this report into a PDF, and it will pull. Oh, okay, so yeah, it will pull into an automatic download, and then you can have the PDF of the full report here. So I think it's a pretty straightforward and simple tool. As Brett mentioned, there are a couple other tools like this. I mean, FEMA's risk index does address some of these things as well, but we've really built this with owners, operators, developers in mind. The strategies and resources guide are also tailored to owner operators. And on the specific location and hazard score, really tying in the SVI index to give you a whole kind of picture in terms of risk, and then addressing those from there. I'm going to stop here, and I'm happy to take some questions if there are any before I jump into the resilience academies.
There was a note, I think perhaps it was involved with both this tool and maybe the last, or no, the last one doesn't really have fire, so I believe it was this one. Just mentioning that on one of the suggestions for those who might be in wildfire prone risk areas, to consider MERV filtration, ideally up to probably 13 or 16. So if you drop down the wildfire risk, I know it's 0 out of 5 here, but they were just noting that there were lack of suggestions there for filtration as a strategy to, you know, hopefully stay safe as particulate matter increases in the area. So
yeah, that's a great point. Thanks for bringing that up. I think Lori mentioned this, but really on the I mean, we'll definitely make a note to get that included here. And quite honestly, it more likely than not is part of one of these links, but to have it as a specific recommendation, I think is a great idea. And Lori did mention this, but on the Climate Safe Housing website and the actual strategies guide, we are building that out to include all hazards and perils. So specific things like that will be included on the guide once that's done. But on the recommendation side here, I think that's a great thing to point out. I appreciate that.
Does the tool factor in how prone an area is to facing grid failures for power outages? So I know you've got storms and you've got high winds and tornadoes, but it's a good question. Like, how does that interplay with just overall grid risk assessments? Because some areas have awful grids. Many, underserved areas sadly have bad grids. I know Michigan just received some dings against us on our personal ratings here. Right. So I'd be curious how much of that comes into your evaluation as a part of the context of things that might stress grids here, like heat waves and hurricanes and all that.
Great question. So I would say the short answer would be it does not, and that is basically because of the data that we're using, right? So this is federally publicly available data on, and I see there's another question in here on future possibilities or just past data, where it kind of depends on what the agencies are looking at, right? So like with FEMA, for example, and their flood maps, it's been quite an issue where I think now the whole country is saying you really need to be looking at forward projections and not just using it as looking at past historical data. So on the grid issue, I mean, I would say not directly, it does not take into account for, Brett, like you mentioned, things like extreme heat or storms, if it's knocked out the grid and knocked out power. But I mean, it would definitely be interesting to see how to tie that in.
Yeah, almost like a grid, as another one, like a grid outage risk. I know losing power in and of itself, well, I mean, it can. I mean, losing power could certainly harm certain people, right? I mean, some people it's like, hey, I don't have to go to school, right? Or I don't have to go to my job, so I'm happy. But other people, that's, a matter of life or death. So it does seem like a worthy risk if, I think we could probably sit here all day and give you lots of suggestions. So
well, and that's the thing, right? I mean, we've built this off of climate risk specifically. So the grid going out is more of a causality, of course, of one of these risks happening. So it's something to keep in mind for the future as we continue to refine this tool in different ways. But it's definitely an interesting thought. Yeah.
Well, and before you get into the next spot, I wanted to quick share something with everybody. So this is the Project Priorities Survey, which is a resource from Enterprise Green certification, and it's used for certification. And it could be used just to generally, it's an open source document you can use to guide your next project. But, this is the one thing where you would use a tool like what Mihir was mentioning, and then going through and saying like, hey, if you notice flooding, yes, I see flooding. Here I use the EGC protect, right? And the risk, it gives you that risk out of 5, right? So you might say, oh, it's 4 out of 5, and this is a high priority. So you're kind of going to go through and fill this out. Each of these items, for the most part, line up with the items that you'll find in those reports for your property. And then what I typically do is print that PDF and then attach it to this report and zip it in for our certification projects, just to give you all some context on this new priorities piece, because a lot of people who are doing Enterprise Green for low-income housing tax credits or HUD or Freddie or FEMA, they're all like surprised by this new requirement by Enterprise. And so we've been trying to get the word out proactively by doing sessions like this and all that. But one question I have too, before we go into the next part, was, is there a way to screen out in that PDF report things that are not relevant? Because that was the one thing I noticed, is that when we're giving our teams these reports, it has a bunch of things, hurricanes are not happening in Michigan. Somehow we actually show up on the rating, which is odd, but okay, tsunamis, they're not happening in Michigan, no way. But it shows up in the report, and it might just be like a lot of clutter, right? Is there a way, or have you looked into a way to screen things out that don't even receive a rating at all?
Yes, I mean, it's just, tricky IT and development coordination that all comes down to quite frankly to budget for developing these tools. So as I said, this tool is always something that we are continuing to refine and evolve and really make better. So these are all things that sort of are on the list and hopefully we'll be able to address at some point.
Yeah.
I mean, but so the biggest thing, the biggest update which happened over the summer, just wrapped up into the fall, was updating all the data sets because basically the federal agencies for really for years between 2016 and 2020 were not updating data sets because they were not either mandated to or did not receive funding to do so. So starting in 2020, most, if not all, of the agencies have gone through and updated their data. So that was the most important thing that we wanted to do, is make sure that the data is most up to date that we were pulling into this tool.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we got a short time here, and then we'll have more time for questions for anyone who's got specific ones. But tell us, where can, I mean, as far as education, some stuff coming up, what do you have on the docket for that?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, these resilience academies that we've started up in 2021, where we are basically working within where Enterprise has a market office in different regions that we work. So Enterprise has about 12 different market offices around the country, the Gulf Coast, the Southeast, Mid-Atlantic, New York, New Jersey, the Midwest, California. We have Southern and Northern, and then Pacific Northwest, and then we have Rocky Mountains and rural and tribal region as well. So the resilience academies are, as I mentioned, basically an education and technical assistance cohort where we come together for about 8 to 10 weeks and take folks through a curriculum of climate risk reduction activities and sessions. So just to give you a little visual how the process works, hopefully you can all see my screen. I'm just going to forward a few slides here. So these are some of the topics that we cover under the academy. Regional climate risk, as I was speaking to earlier, assessing portfolio and building risk, which we've talked about today, implementation strategies to address risk, understanding and accessing planning and financing, community and resident engagement, equity strategies, and then also things like business continuity planning, emergency preparedness, even in areas where the perils, as I mentioned, might not be as in our faces as areas like the Gulf South or California, but they're more chronic stressors that are changing over time. So how the process works is we have an open application period. The academy is free to participate in, but we still do have a application process. And then once folks are accepted, we'll hold a kickoff session, which has now, for the first time, starting this fall, has started to be in person, and then we'll hold virtual sessions for about 8 to 10 weeks after that, focusing on these topics that you see here. And each session will include a mix of guest speakers, case studies and success stories and failure stories, as well as just general presentations from subject matter experts within Enterprise and outside of Enterprise. And we do really build the academy based off of a lot of the tools that you've seen here, as well as some others that we have. So portfolio protect and strategies for multifamily building resilience we talked about today. We also focus on health action planning, business continuity toolkit, which we also have. And we do incorporate some more hands-on engaged working sessions to actually go through a building risk assessment and then go over the report, or take folks through that business continuity toolkit and kind of do a working session around that. And then the Academy also does include one-on-one technical assistance sessions with a third-party consultant that we bring on to deliver that technical assistance. And that could serve for anything around building strategies and implementation to funding and financing. We also do provide a database of available funding opportunities, current, past, and things that we might know of that are maybe not like IRA funding or infrastructure funding that are still kind of getting built out. And yeah, so I mean, again, basically, I think beyond the tailored technical assistance, which I think is a great aspect of the program, and just the general kind of webinar style education sessions, just like this one, having a cohort of peers, you know, just like you've built here, Brett, I think is a real benefit to really talk to other folks, to see what's working, to see what's not, and kind of share that learning experience with other owner operators, developers around the region. The Academy is structured and available to owners and operators of affordable housing. You can be a developer also, but you at least have to be a owner operator. And last thing I'll mention on this is region. So we have already gone to the Southeast and the Gulf Coast, and we're currently working in New York and New Jersey with our Academy, but early next year, we will be going to the West Coast and then the Rocky Mountain and Southwest region. And then 2024, we'll be coming to the Midwest and the Mid-Atlantic. So I'll drop the link to our academies in the chat so you all can have that and follow along with it to see when we're coming where.
Do you have anything you can share visually on that for people who don't see the chat in the future?
In terms of the dates?
Yeah, and where they can go maybe to sign up if they're interested in learning more.
I think if you unfortunately I don't have any visual
That's okay.
or slides, but yeah, I mean, if folks just keep track of us on our LinkedIn, we always announce it, or any of our listservs, they'll definitely get it, and you can feel free to email me as well.
Is there any reason, and it's great, you're coming to the Midwest here and mentioning some of the other regions if some people are watching. Is there any reason that it's just not all virtual? Or are you trying to get people connected in certain regions? And I say that because, maybe it was some time ago that you engaged people in those other areas, but in 2024, there might be many more who in that area who are like, hey, I still want to learn about this stuff, right? Have you considered that, or is it really the intention of creating sort of a cohort of folks that are at least a couple states away from each other to work with each other? You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
So we definitely are trying to build that community cohesion within the region that we work in. I mean, I also should mention Enterprise does have, in all these regions that I mentioned, market offices and market staff who every day are working with partners on the ground, owners, operators, developers, through other programming and through other technical assistance. So there definitely is a group of folks who are already doing great work in each region. So continuing to build that community, I think around specific topics is definitely one goal, but then also just keeping the groups manageable where folks can connect with each other within the sessions. And also we can provide more intimate technical assistance and guidance and really a tailored approach versus having 200 people in a Zoom room is just the approach we're taking. So our groups are usually between 20 to 25 different organizations within each region. And the in-person is just for the kickoff. The rest of the sessions are over Zoom. But again, doing that in-person kickoff really just to get people familiar with each other, and we found it's just really, it makes a difference for the rest of the Zoom, for the rest of the sessions over Zoom.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And I know we are at our time. So just to, again, wrap up, again, just as a reminder, everybody can watch a recording of this session anytime you want. You're free to share it. Make sure you subscribe on our channel and you'll get instant access when it is available and ready. For those of you watching this in the future, not right now, but on demand, make sure to take your quiz with an 80% passing rate. You can find that quiz on our GBCI channel, our Thinkific channel, and get that as well. For those of you who are watching this live, make sure to take check your spam for certs@gutenbergcerts.com as long as you were here for the entire CEU approved time and you were properly logged into Zoom. You will receive your certificate, but check your spam there from certs@gutenbergcerts.com. And as always, a huge thanks to our board of directors, our volunteers, our executive director, Jose Reyna, our 250 members. We're hoping to get to 300 here next year by the end of the year. I hope you can help us out. And then all of our top tier sponsors, Rheem, Mitsubishi, April Air, Build Equinox, Indo Window Aware, Radon, everyone who supports our work and allow us to do what we do. Enterprise has so many fantastic resources on their website. So please go there and check it out. They have all sorts of green building resources, not just to name the ones we looked at today, but their Enterprise Green Community Certification Program, if you're doing affordable housing, helps you put a program together and understand how to evaluate green, and gives you a checklist and all that to take a look at. It's a free tool to use. There are costs for certification, of course, and then there's all sorts of free resources they have on their site to help you develop a project, build a project, and then maintain a project with operations and maintenance resources as well. So we definitely appreciate all the work that they're doing. With that, we appreciate Lori, who had to go, and then here as well for your time. And I think I don't see any other questions. So we're taking next week off for the holiday here in the United States anyway. So we will catch you in the last week of November, everybody, for a session on the Weatherization Action Agency workforce and training and resources that are available in every single county in the country for affordable housing renovation projects. So we're going to keep that conversation going. So Mihir, thank you so much.
Thanks
Take
so
care.
much.
Good to meet you.
Great to meet you. Feel free to reach out with any questions. Appreciate it.
All right. Take care all. Thanks. Bye.
Be sure to check out all of our courses available online that you can watch anytime and anywhere to pick up your CEUs. Before you go, make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube to get weekly updates and stay up to date on green building science courses, webinars, and home tours. Thanks again.